So I'll begin the process, I guess, since I'm already up there. There's three pieces of information here I'll pass around. They're referenced, this one here I only printed out two of 42 pages on sheet. But I'll give you an idea of what's covered. Notice that the URLs, what you have to type into the top of your web browser to see these full documents are there if you want to copy them. The one that I really was impressed with was the New Zealand Association of Woodturners. This guy who edited it, presented it for their webpage, has gone into a lot of stuff about not just toxicity of dust, but of finishes and all that sort of stuff. So I can pass those around. You can not have to listen to my droning for part of the time. Okay, so I'll start this by saying I'm not a medical professional. I never have been, and I never will be. So take what I say with a grain of salt, and you should always, if you have any questions, consult a proper professional like your doctor. At least that'll get you started in the process.
Gary, there's a good website too called the Wood Database.
Yep.
And he has a book too, and every chunk of wood he has in there has the toxicity of the wood on it.
Right. Yeah, and I'll get into it in here. You've got to be careful about reading some of these tables. You can't take it as gospel, because Yogi's different from me, and we're both different from Diane. So our reaction to our bodies would have to different woods is going to be totally different, even though they say it's a low toxicity. If you've got a sensitivity to it, that all bets are off. Okay? So, virtually everything in sufficient amount can be toxic. Just think of something we commonly refer to as table salt. Most people deliberately put it on their food. It would take a massive amount of table salt to kill you immediately, and most likely it would be sick to your stomach before reaching the toxic level. That's not the case for many other chemicals. For example, there are several salts of arsenic that could be very deadly in a much lower amounts than you would ever put on in table salt, but I bet you would never consider deliberately putting them on your food. Someone else's food, well, that's a different discussion. Wood's like everything else in this world. It consists of many different chemicals. In fact, possibly hundreds of chemicals. These chemicals are either manufactured by the living processes within the tree, or taken up by absorption from either the ground or the groundwater that's close by. Any one, and maybe even several of the chemical constituents in a particular wood could have toxic effects ranging from barely noticeable to deadly. The speed it takes for any chemical to produce toxic effects are referred to as either acute toxicity, immediate or at least fast effects, or chronic toxicity, effects that can manifest themselves days or even years later. Chronic effects, to give you a sort of something to wrap your mind around, chronic effects include chronically obstructive pulmonary disorder, some people refer to it as COPD, emphysema, asthma, and even cancer. And some of the information going around has that. You see some of the things are listed as being possible cancer. Unless a wood has a significant amount of toxic chemicals in it, and those chemicals are released into the body after entry, it is unlikely to be considered toxic, especially acutely toxic. In other words, the toxic chemicals not only have to be present in the wood, but the human body must be able to extract those chemicals from the wood for toxic effects to be encountered. So some chemicals in wood may be acutely toxic on their own, but because they are bound up in the wood and our bodies are not likely to cause them to be freed from the wood in sufficient amounts, they are in effect less toxic in the short term. However, long-term exposure could result in chronic toxic effects. We must consider when talking about toxicity certain things. Two variables that are to be considered are dosage, or the amount that you take in, and the length of your exposure. These can vary up and down, independently or together, and each combination can result in a different toxic effect. Following up on what we've just learned about toxicity related to dosage and time of exposure, and thinking about wood dust in particular, let's get into the topic further. We've discussed that wood consists of chemicals, usually many chemicals, and toxicity depends on how and when those chemicals actually come out of the wood and into our bodies. Let's explore that particular idea. Chemicals leach out of the wood based on the surface area in contact with those body fluids that actually can do the leaching out of the wood. So let's take a hypothetical block of wood that's 1 inch by 1 inch by 1 inch. That block has a surface area of 6 square inches. There's 6 faces, each 1 by 1 inch, so 6 square inches. However, if we take that same block of wood and sand it until we get nothing but the sanding dust, that surface area rockets up to hundreds of square inches, because each one of those particles has got a surface area and they all add up. Now you can see why wood dust is potentially more dangerous than, say, planer chips. The surface area of wood dust available to yield up the chemicals in it can result in a higher dosage in a shorter period of time in our bodies. Some of those chemicals will have no toxic effects on us over the short term or long term because they have such low toxicity. But when those chemicals are more toxic, the dosage coming out of the dust is greatly increased, leading to acute or chronic toxicity. Let's move on to another aspect of wood dust and its effect on us. That area is the area of allergic reactions. And some people just refer to it as sensitivity. Some of the chemicals in wood are not really toxic to us in the sense that we have been discussing, but rather they induce in us an effect or sensitivity that can be different based on how our bodies react to them on contact. That contact can be on our skin, in our eyes, in our nose, or in our lungs. This effect is usually referred to as an allergic reaction. In allergic reactions, the body's immune system detects at least one chemical that is considered foreign and must be defended against. The defense mechanism is the release of histamine, which is intended to flush the foreign chemicals out of our bodies by causing our eyes to water, making our nose run, in some form the wheezing or coughing that we produce, and inducing sneezing. Those effects, while bothersome, are hardly deadly. However, there is one other potentially deadly reaction that can occur in this situation, and that's called anaphylactic shock. This is where the body can actually react so heavily that breathing can stop and or cardiac arrest can happen. To use a common example, just think of children who cannot be in contact with any amount of peanut butter or its byproducts. These children typically carry an EpiPen of adrenaline, which can reverse the effects or at least slow the effects enough to allow for an ambulance to transport the child. Wood dust, being so small in physical size, can get everywhere. In the eyes, in the nasal passages, under rings, under collars and cuffs, behind waistbands. Dr. Yogi about that one. And the socks, for example. If you have ever worked with wood and it resulted in a rash or itchiness in these areas, you must consider that you're at least sensitive, if not allergic to that wood. For your safety, please discontinue working with that wood and consult your doctor before using it again. Being sensitive is bad enough, but that first sensitivity reaction may be the only warning you're going to get that the next time you use it, you're going to end up with a full-blown allergic reaction. The problem with the full-blown anaphylactic response to is if you're working alone and then nobody can call an ambulance for you, and you're not going to have enough breath to either call for help or be able to use the phone to call an ambulance to help you. If you want to investigate which woods present with what risks, there are many online resources from reputable sources that you can refer to, and some of those examples are passing around. Note the URLs if you wish to visit them at your leisure at home, and by putting in toxicity of wood dust in your search, in the Google search, you're going to get all kinds of stuff. Just try to not go to Joe Blow's wood shop, but go to a reputable university or medical source or whatever. These sites usually have tables of wood listed by common and scientific names. Sometimes that's important because you can buy a wood under a certain name and it doesn't make any sense. It looks like it's a new wood to you, but it's not. It's the same rosewood, and it's got the same toxicity, but people from various countries use different common names for it. They give the ratings for the toxicity and sensitivity of the woods. Please remember that this data is averaged over large numbers of data points for many different test subjects, and your reaction can be atypical, either for better or for worse. Like, I think, Yogi, you had problems with Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola caused problems for Yogi. I've used Coca-Cola several times when you could still get a hold of it, never had a problem. So it's all depending upon how your body is gonna
And
react.
it just
to
showed up, cause I turned it before and never bothered me,
Yep,
and on that
yeah.
one.
And that could be source. Cocobolo from a particular area, it's not got a problem because it didn't leach up out of the ground, those particular chemicals, but another source, it did have those particular chemicals in it, and that was the chemicals that Yogi was sensitive to.
So try it again and see what happens.
That's right. Roll the wheel.
I was gonna say it comes with old age, but then you would've been.
I would've had it too, so
Okay, so in other words, a particular wood listed may be listed as having a certain level of sensitivity or toxicity, but you may not have bad effects from it at all. However, you must consider the other side of the coin. It can be possible for a wood listed with low toxicity and or sensitivity that it may cause you problems at some level or another. In preparation for closing, there are two other topics I should raise. One is that spalted wood is very attractive because of the color streaking in the wood, but you should be aware that the color is usually from mold in the wood. That mold in your body can cause infections that are not only hard to diagnose, but also to treat. The last one is not related to wood dust, but I will bring it up anyway, and it's dust from grinding our turning tools. Particles from the grinder wheels and from the tool steel can get in our lungs, causing effects that can mimic asbestosis. That's the constant irritation in the lungs. That could end up mimicking the same type of effects, and asbestosis is just a precursor to cancer. So what's our bottom, sorry? Somebody say something? Yes?
There's a woman in the States that does a lot of stuff with spalted wood.
Yes,
And she colors them and everything.
yeah.
And I attended a thing where she was talking about, and she said that the spalted wood is in fact not toxic to people.
Well, it may be a situation where the wood itself is not, it's everybody's different type of thing. So I don't know. I've not been privy to that.
But the molds that are in
Put it in the
the,
microwave, kills it.
the molds that create the spalting don't affect humans, but, I mean, this is now fifth hand or something, so.
Yeah, so,
She
well,
had herself-
But you can do it, you can, I mean, I think it.
do you remember the
I
research?
can, I can check it.
It's
She has
Sarah
a website.
Robertson.
Sarah Robertson?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Okay, so if you're working a lot with spalted timbers, look up Sarah Robertson,
Robinson.
with a Google search and take a look at what she says.
because she's an expert.
Yeah, and I was just about that point, I'm not. And
Yeah.
so it's best to go to the expert.
Gary, it might be a case of the dust, not the mold spores itself for a lot of people, because spalted wood sands a lot differently
It
and
could be,
generates a lot more sandy dust too.
yeah, that's very possible. Yeah. Okay, good point. So what's our bottom line takeaways from all of this? 1, wood dust is more likely to cause you problems than wood chips or planks because the surface area is so much greater. 2, first use of a particular type of wood should be done carefully. You may only get one chance to discover you should not be using it. In fact, your first exposure may sensitize the body, and when used a second time, an allergic reaction could happen. 3, reference material is available online for you concerning wood, but it should be considered a guideline and not definitive. Each person is unique, and so is their body's response to wood dust exposure. Controlling dust, not only at source, but generally, is a very wise thing to do. You can control dust at source by having your line hooked up at the lathe, but generally is these types of general filters that pick out, because not everything is going to get picked up. That's all that dust is in the air. With these circulating ones, as long as it's in the air, it's going to get the waft of, it's cooler down here than it is up there, so it wants to rise. So it's going to set up a circulating effect, and that's the best way. Maybe I'm stealing somebody else's thunder, but okay, so I'll shut up. Bill's going to talk about placement. Good. So this, combined with the use of personal protective equipment, dust masks, dust hoods, is a good plan. And Callum and Bill will be expanding on this in their talks coming up. The last item, no symptoms at time of use is no indication that your body is not suffering ill effects from dust exposure, because some effects cause chronic diseases months or even years later. And that's it. Thank you for your time. Any questions that I can't answer?
I've got one you can answer.
Okay,
I read somewhere a little while ago, and I wish I could find it, but I can't. Someone was saying that when you have something on your hands, like we use a lot of oils and alcohols and things, that 2 minutes after you put something on your hand, it's in your blood, it's in your blood system.
it's quite likely.
It depends on
Alcohols especially?
Yeah, it depends on the
Osmosis.
compound. Alcohols penetrate the skin very, very quickly, whereas some of the oils don't.
Yeah, just think of tobacco patches.
Yeah.
They put them on the skin, gravel, or Dramamine patches for behind your ear for traveling. That's all by transdermal absorption, so yeah.
A good test for that is rub some garlic on your soles of your feet.
And then breathe it out later.
Oh, you'll taste it 5 minutes later.
Yeah.
Don't ask me how I know.
A friend told you, right?
I had to try it.
You can't make wine from carbon.
Okay, Callum and Bill, have either of you decided which one's gonna go next? Bill? Okay, Bill, turn it over to Bill.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you.